I really don't like the word boundaries when it comes to marriage and relationships. And hear me out, because I can already sense many of you getting your heckles out and you're wanting to put the nasty comment already. But here's the reason. Especially when you look at a marriage or a family unit, and those are the two we'll focus on for this video, especially a marriage. A boundary, just by its word, like the word means something that I put up to protect me from you. And in an ideal relationship, especially a marriage, the idea is about taking down the walls between two people so that you have trust and you have vulnerability and you can be open with each other, and that there's nothing that is separating you from the other person. And so the word boundaries, I believe, can put a picture in someone's mind of how I need to separate myself or how I need to protect myself from you. And it can begin to actually lead us to wall part of ourselves off, or to in some ways see the other person as an enemy or as a threat. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean that I don't agree with the premise necessarily of boundaries. I think it is appropriate to be able to state your wishes and desires, or the expectations that you have of another person with them, in a healthy and a loving way. My husband and I have experienced our fair share of learning how to do this in the best way, or in better ways, as we've been married. We just celebrated 13 years of marriage. And there's definitely been times in our marriage where we've fought about things and I said things I shouldn't have, or my husband reacted in a way that he shouldn't have. And yes, we had to have a conversation about what rules of engagement should look like. Or there's been times in our marriage, as my husband and I have had shifting jobs. My husband was in the military when we were first married, and I was not employed. And then he got out of the military and he took some time off to figure out the next thing he wanted to do, while I was the person who was providing for the family. And we've shifted in that role through the years until, of course, now I work full time. I'm the CEO of a company, and he's been going back to flight school to become a commercial flight student or commercial airline pilot in the future. And so there's been conversations about, well, what do we need from each other with these shifting work demands and these shifting work schedules? And he would never call it a boundary, and I would never call it a boundary. But one of the things that my husband has needed for him during this time is the ability to pursue his dreams and his goals while feeling fully supported. And I've had to figure out how that looks because I work full time as well. And so he never had to say, I have a boundary that I need to be able to pursue the things that I want to do in life, and I need you to figure out how to support me in that. That wasn't a boundary that he said. It wasn't like an ultimatum or something like that he put up. And I think a lot of times in relationships, people will set boundaries because they need something. And instead of just having the conversation and figuring out together what they need, they set this hard line boundary of, this is something you can't cross. Now, through our marriage, another thing that we've also had to learn is, like, how do we engage with each other? And how do I make sure that I respond back or talk about issues with my husband in a way where he still feels respected and that he doesn't feel disrespected? And early on in our marriage, I would bring things up in groups of people, which is absolutely not ideal to do. And again, my husband never said, I have a boundary that you can't do that. You know, for me and for my own self-worth or self-protection, if he was the one saying this, he never said, you can't do that. It's a boundary I have to protect myself. But he's definitely said, hey, the way that happened, I felt embarrassed, or I didn't feel like it was the appropriate thing. Let's talk about how that can happen differently in the future. Another way that boundaries comes up a lot is when people are married to someone who is an addict or who is engaged in harmful behaviors. And this, I do believe, is a little bit different of a conversation, because you can be dealing with someone who's not thinking logically about a certain area. If you're married to someone who's an alcoholic and they're not seeing the harm that they're doing, and they're not in a space where they can have a a normal conversation and actually understand the impact that they're having on someone else, then you may need to say things and set some boundaries. Because again, in the marriage helper ecosystem, the way that we talk about boundaries is it's a safeguard that offers protection. And it's not that I'm trying to keep myself from you. I'm actually trying to protect our marriage and the way in the future of our marriage, the way that we interact with each other by putting this in place. And so there could be a boundary, and it would be appropriate for there to be a boundary of you can't drink while you're driving the kids. You can't drink when you have other people under your care. Like that can lead to a consequence, because that's the thing about boundaries. If a boundary isn't followed, then just by the premise of a boundary, then there has to be some kind of consequence to follow. So that's why we at Marriage Helper really talk about these safeguards that offer protection and shifting this mindset of a boundary as being an ultimatum or being a punishment that we put on the other person. Or sometimes people use boundaries as a way to start controlling the other person. And actually the boundary comes across as, I have this boundary that you can't do this or you can't do that, when it's a normal thing to do. Someone might say, you're crossing my boundary when you're disagreeing with me or something like that. And that's not what a boundary should be. It's a mindset shift, thinking more about how can we actually create the things that protect the marriage and protect the relationship and create safeguards around the marriage. And sometimes that might feel like you're creating a safeguard around yourself in the case of drinking or addiction, or if there's behavior that shouldn't be happening that's harmful to one person or other people, then we always recommend at Marriage Helper that you get safe. And that, yes, you may need to set a safeguard that offers protection that has a consequence around it. We have a full explanation of how to think about boundaries in a previous podcast, which we can link to in the show notes, called The Ultimate Guide to Boundaries. We also have a full toolkit inside of our membership that goes super in depth to all of the nuances and ways to think about boundaries, and also to begin thinking about what we call cores, which are the continuing our relationship essentials. But here's the bottom line of what I hope you understand. Boundaries are not meant to create separation in a relationship, because when you add separation, you hurt trust, you hurt openness, you hurt the ability to be vulnerable with each other. That's not the way that boundaries should be viewed. If there's currently things happening like addiction, for example, or control issues that is leading to bad things to happen in the relationship. If someone's an alcoholic and they're driving around and they could be a harm to themselves or to others, especially if they have kids in the car or if you're in the car with them, then yes, you may need to set a boundary of, I'm not going to get in the car with you. I'm not going to put the kids in the car with you if you're drinking. But again, you're not doing that to punish the other person. Boundaries are never supposed to be something to punish the other person, and they're never supposed to be ultimatums we give the other person, where we say something like, I have this boundary. If you don't leave your affair partner and come back to me immediately, then I'm filing for divorce. It's not a boundary, that's an ultimatum. So you need to get really clear as to what you're trying to protect. And even in the instance of saying, I'm not going to drive with you if you're driving drunk, for example, you're still, even though you're protecting you, you're also protecting the future of the marriage, because you're trying to identify a specific behavior that is causing harm that needs to be stopped. And that's an appropriate use of these safeguards that offer protection. We'll link in the show notes to how you can find out more in the Boundaries Toolkit in our membership that goes even further into this. But I hope you at least begin to understand some of the differences between boundaries, safeguards that offer protection, and ultimatums, and better understand the one that you need to use. Now, we can definitely help in any of those situations. About 68% of the people that come to us at Marriage Helper have a spouse who's involved in an affair. We work with several people, hundreds of people in a month, that their spouse is dealing with some sort of addiction, where there's control issues, where divorce has been filed. So our team is very acutely aware of these issues and how to best set these safeguards, best set these boundaries in a way that is healthy and helpful to the future of the marriage, because our hope is that it can be saved, and we hope that it will be saved. And we can help you do that in our full 90-day program that we guide people through to get you personalized coaching, as well as intensive workshops and turnaround, along with access to our entire membership. I recommend that you book a call with one of our intake specialists to dive deeper into what your situation is and to understand what your true goals are in wanting to save the marriage and how Marriage Helper can help. You can do that by going to marriagehelper.com/book now and booking a free call with one of our intake specialists today.